Poliomyelitis is an old disease in humans, but it only became a significant health concern at the beginning of the 20th century. It is caused by poliovirus, a member of an enterovirus family of Picornavidae, which usually cause an asymptomatic infection of the human intestine. And according to World Health Organization, in May 1988, the World Health Assembly was resolved to eradicate polio from the world, and over 99% of the poliomyelitis cases have been reduced as a result of this eradication, and the endemic circulation type 2 has been halted. Killed and live vaccines were created in mid-20th century, and live attenuated oral strains or oral polio vaccine or OPV were used in major campaigns as part of the World Health Organization program to eliminate poliomyelitis, with the result that there are only 4 countries in the world from which poliomyelitis has never been eradicated.
Case study. It's 1954 and about 300 children from the same community in Chicago enjoy swimming and other sports at the nearby YMCA. Over a 3-week duration, 17 of these children experienced flu-like symptoms, including fevers of up to 39.5 degrees Celsius, sore throat, myalgia, headache, and malaise. These symptoms last for an average of 5 days, during which victims begins to complain of stiff neck, markedly increased muscle pain, occasional muscle spasms, and increased fever, up to 41 degrees Celsius. These symptoms are followed by a flaccid paralysis that varies widely in its degree of severity. Some patients experience paralysis of only a few muscle groups, in one leg for example, while others develop complete flaccid paralysis of all 4 extremities and are totally incapacitated. 4 of the 17 victims eventually make full recoveries, but 8 of them recover with varying degrees of residual paralysis. 5 of the victims experience a continuation of the illness, in which flaccid paralysis of the pharynx, vocal cord, and respiratory muscle develops. These victims are able to breathe only with the help of mechanical device that provides external respiratory compression. All of them die within the next 6 months. So what is the diagnosis? The timing of the outbreak, the progression of symptoms, and the development of varying degrees of flaccid paralysis all point to a classic epidemic of poliomyelitis. What is the causative agent? The causative agent is the poliovirus, one of the enteroviruses which are member of Picornaviridae family. The picornaviruses are plus-strand, single-stranded RNA viruses with icosahedral capsids that are about 30 nanometer in diameter. Their variants do not have envelopes. Polioviruses are typically lytic viruses, and their replication results in destruction of the infected host cells. What is the pathogenic processes? The poliovirus initially infects the mucosa of nasopharynx and GI tract. It then spreads to the CNS, where it replicates the neurons of the gray matter of both the brain and the spinal cord. The virus travels both through the bloodstream and by migration along neural pathways. Flaccid paralysis of limb muscles occurs when anterior horn cells of the spinal cord are destroyed as a result of lytic viral replication. Bulbar polio, with paralysis of the respiratory muscles, results from the viral invasion of the medulla oblongata. So how is this disease prevented? Poliomyelitis can be prevented quite effectively with a vaccine. The current vaccine of choice is the oral polio vaccine, which is based on a attenuated version of the virus. And that's all for the case studies.
So, good day everyone. I'm Zia Samantha. and I am assigned to present the pathophysiology of poliomyelitis. So as you can see, no, mostly makita natin ni siya sa KMJS na mga story na siya ano nga, ang other leg diya kay dili na ma-move tapos ang upper part is somewhat bloated or times na ang sa arm niya, ang sa arm sa patient ang may problem. But mostly ma-notice dyan ang ano sa leg part. Okay, so acute poliomyelitis is caused by a small ribonucleic acid virus of enterovirus group of the picornovirus family. A single-stranded RNA core is surrounded by a protein capsid without a lipid envelope, which makes poliovirus resistant to lipid solvents and stable at low pH. Three anti-genetically distinct strains are known, with the type 1 accounting for 85% of cases of paralytic illnesses. Infections with one type does not protect from the other group or other types. However, immunity to each of the strains is lifelong. So, ang strains is parang ano, tulad gud sa dengue na dengue 1, halimbawa, first dengue jud nimo sa tao, sa patient, tapos mo to first strain na niya pagka second na po niya nga nahitabungan nag-dengue na po siya, second strain o third strain di ba naman po na. So same lang po sa strains nga nga naadere sa polio. So the virus enters through the respiratory route or fecal. After, it enters the lymphoid tissues of the gastrointestinal tract. A minor or primary viremia follows with spread of virus to the reticuloendothelial system. So, viremia means presence ng virus sa blood. So, na-infect na ng virus ang blood. At this point, infection may be already contained, or worse, the virus may be further multiply and cause several days to secondary viremia, culminating in the development of symptoms and antibodies. So, in paralytic infections, poliovirus enters the central nervous system, whether via migration up to the peripheral nerves or via secondary viremia. Significant damage occurs only in the brain and spinal cord, particularly the nerves in the brain that is autonomic and controlling function. Inflammation compounds the damage produced by the primary viral invasion. Poliovirus is present in the throat and feces during the incubation and after symptoms onset persist 1 to 2 weeks in the throat and 3 to 6 weeks in feces. So, here are the factors na makalead sa serious neurologic damage sa polio. So, first is the increasing age. So, as we all know na as we grow old, no, atong mga cells and ang system nato sa body is naga-weak na pod. So, muna na dili kay siya maka-provide og protection sa body. So, recent tonsillectomy or intramuscular injection. So, recent tonsillectomy. Tonsillectomy is removal sa tonsil sa tao. This is due to infection or inflammatory. So, kailangan siya i-remove para ma-reduce ang risk sa tao. So, pregnancy, impairment of B-cell function, physical exertion, concurrent with onset of the central nervous system phase. So, here we have the 3 phase on how the poliovirus invade the human system. So, first, The enterovirus of poliomyelitis infect human intestinal tract through the fecal route or oral route. So, they both know. And then, uh, oral route or fecal route. Example, ang tao na infected maggunit sa tao na healthy. And then, katong tao na infected nagka-spread og particles sa tao na healthy, for example, through saliva. Tapos nagunit-gunit siya sa other na tao. And then, without knowing na infected ay itong yang atubang or na virus na ginadala. So, nagunit lang po siya diretso sa iyang mouth. So, ang nga reason na mag-occur ang virus and maka-enter siya sa human body. The virus multiply in oropharyngeal and lower gastrointestinal tract. During the first or 1 to 3 weeks incubation period, virus may be secreted in saliva and feces during this period, causing most host-to-host transmission. So, mo to akong gi-explain kanina, no? After the initial alimentary phase, the virus drains into the cervical and mesenteric lymph nodes and into the bloodstream. So, lymphatic phase, take note lang na to, lymphatic phase is lymph nodes and mesenteric lymph nodes. So, after niya gagi sa lymphatic phase sa mga lymph nodes nato, the virus will then proceed to viremic phase, which is mo na tong giingon ako nga ang virus na nasa blood or na-infect na ng virus ang blood ng host. Only 5% of infected patients have selected nervous system involvement after viremia, but it is believed that the replication of intraneural sites maintains the viremia and increases the likelihood that the virus will enter to the nervous system. So poliovirus enters the nervous system by either crossing the blood-brain barrier or axonal transportation from the peripheral nerves. So, blood-brain barrier, peripheral nerve system. It can cause nervous system infection by involving the placental gyrus, thalamus, hypothalamus, motor nuclear of a brain stem, and surrounding reticular, information vestibular, and cerebellar nuclei, and neurons of the anterior and intermediate columns of the spinal cord. The nerve cells undergo a central chromatolysis along with the inflammatory reaction while multiplication of the virus precedes onset of paralysis. As the chromatolysis process goes on further, muscle paralysis or even atrophy appears when fewer than 10% of the neurons survive corresponding to the cord segments. Gliosis develops when the inflammatory infiltrate and had subsided, but most surviving neurons show full recovery. So, mato siya na. So, as we all know naman nga, pag, halimbawa, bisag any gani na virus or, for example, kahit parasite nga nasa atong brain, di ba? Infected tanan na part sa atong body. So, how much more na kani ang target sa virus is ang neurons or ang naa sa imong brain. So, obviously, ma-infect jud tanan ang sa body nimo. So, mao ni siya no ang nawong sa naay polio. Common ni siya sa Africa because uh, the vaccine in Africa is not really common, as we all know that Africa belongs to the one of the poorest country na even gani ilang water di nila ma-afford og buy. So no, that's why vaccines are very important to prevent viruses na mag-invade sa tong body and to cause harm or kanang longer na effect sa tong body. That's all. Thank you.
Clinical presentation of poliomyelitis. The incubation period of poliovirus from contact to initial clinical symptoms is usually considered to be 8 to 12 days, with a range of 5 to 35 days. Paralysis, if it occurs, appears 3 to 8 days after the initial symptoms. There are various types of poliomyelitis. First is the abortive poliomyelitis. In about 5% of patients, influenza-like syndrome occurs 1 to 2 weeks after infection. Fever, malaise, and anorexia and headache are prominent features, and there may be sore throat and abdominal or muscular pain. Vomiting occurs irregularly. The illness is short-lived, up to 2 to 3 days. Recovery is complete and no neurologic signs of sequel develop and clinical manifestation. The next type of poliomyelitis is non-paralytic poliomyelitis. In about 1% of patients experience the abortive type associated with aseptic meningitis such as neck rigidity, followed by CSF showing changes of aseptic meningitis. The manifestation disappear on 1 to 2 days and leave no paralytic manifestation or clinical manifestation. The third type is the paralytic poliomyelitis, occurs in 0.51% of all cases, and it usually begins with manifestation of abortive or non-paralytic poliomyelitis. Then after 3 to 8 days, the major symptoms, however, are due to invasions of the motor veins and which are responsible for movement of the muscle. This viral invasion causes inflammation and then destruction of these nerves. These nerves is the spinal poliomyelitis, which the muscles affected are lower limbs and the upper limbs. The muscle limbs are the most common affected ones, but muscles of chest walls, diaphragm, abdominal wall, urinary bladder, and bowel may affect. The paralysis is characterized by being asymmetrical, patchy, non-progressive, purely motor and lower motor neuron lesion associated with hypotonia, loss of deep reflexes, and muscle wasting. Second nerve is the bulbar poliomyelitis. Bulb of the brain to midbrain, pons, and medulla contain following centers: respiratory, heat-regulating center, and motor of nucleus of cranial nerves. Clinically, patient will get bradycardia, irregular respiration with apnea, cyanosis, and respiratory failure, cranial nerves palsy, squint, pinpoint pupils, dysphagia, nasal tone, and nasal regurgitation of fluid. Next is hypo or hypothermia. Third nerve is encephalitis poliomyelitis. Manifestation of encephalitis are evident: disturbed consciousness from drowsiness to coma, convulsions, and localized manifestations as blindness, deafness, and paralysis, monoplegia or hemiplegia. Diagnosis depend on presence of epidemic of polio, isolation of the virus from CSF, and increased antibody titer against polio.
For the treatment of poliomyelitis, otherwise known as polio, as of now, there's no known cure for polio. The only way to combat this virus is through prevention via vaccination. When it comes to treating the symptoms of polio, the only ways that are used would be pain relievers, ventilators to aid in breathing, and physical therapy to prevent deformation and loss of muscle function. The polio vaccine is safe and is 99% effective in protecting children from polio. There are two types of polio vaccine. The first type is the inactivated poliovirus vaccine, aka IPV, which is mainly used in the United States of America, and the second type, which is the oral poliovirus vaccine, which is mainly used in the other parts of the world. Children must receive 4 doses, while adults who were not vaccinated in their youth must receive 3 doses at some point of their lives.